Thank you for tuning in to today's AMA with the team behind Arbitrum. In today's AMA, the team goes over the future of Arbitrum, the Nitro upgrade, how Arbitrum compares to ZK rollups, and tons more. Just a disclaimer before we start, the first 2.5 questions will sound a little different than the rest because our recording was cut off, so we just re-recorded those two and put them in there. But make sure you stay tuned till the end of the video to hear more on how you can participate within the Arbitrum ecosystem, as well as even apply to join the team. With that being said, enjoy the AMA. So when will the beta phase of Arbitrum 1 be complete, or aka, when will Arbitrum be in its final form?
Yeah, so the truth is Arbitrum, like any software, doesn't really have a final form, including Ethereum, right? When will Ethereum be in its final form? I don't know. Even Bitcoin, I suspect, will never truly have a final form, despite what some people will tell you. So yeah, there are a number of sort of important milestones, I would say, coming up that we're looking forward to. I think one, in my mind, the most like important and exciting thing is sort of getting rid of the beta tag in mainnet beta. We're keeping that there as long as we still have these kind of trusted or centralized, let's call them guardrails in place. The analogy I've been using is like it's fully implemented. It's as though we have a bike. We just sort of have training wheels on it at the moment. And that's just while we, continue to audit and test and battle test and sort of gain confidence in the system. But when we can sort of, we'll progressively lift those off, progressively decentralized, and sort of once we get past that point, when we can sort of credibly get rid of the beta tag, to me, that'll probably be the most exciting day that we will have had so far. So that's the big thing. Some other important things. There's the big upgrade to Nitro, which we've written about in a blog post, and we'll probably talk more about that in a bit. But this is basically a move in our architecture towards sort of even more EVM compatibility. And what this will translate to for users, this means better performance, which will ultimately translate to lower fees for users, because basically we get sort of better performance with validation, kind of pound for pound. So lower fees. And then also for developers, this will mean it's sort of easier to reason about what's going on, because it'll be sort of similar to using Ethereum like we're used to, particularly when it comes to pricing of gas and things like that. So Nitro. And then I would say probably the other big one in terms of as Arbitrum continues to evolve is the sort of distributed sequencer architecture. Which instead of having the centralized sequencer that sort of has control of ordering, we can distribute it. If all goes well, this will minimize MEV. Ideally, we'll have even less MEV than layer one, which is pretty cool. And this is something Ed's kind of been spearheading the R&D on this. So maybe we'll talk more about that later. But I think we have a nice path forward there, and that's kind of exciting cutting edge stuff. So those are the things that come to mind there.
What will the next, the transition be like from where Arbitrum is right now to the future where most action is happening on Arbitrum or like other layer twos? So like, I guess this is more referring to like the adoption of layer two, like over time. Like how do you kind of see that playing out?
Yeah, we're very happy with how things have come along so far. It's easy to forget it's only been a few months, and there's a lot of activity that's going on in Arbitrum. I think everyone kind of at this point, I think everyone realizes that like layer two is kind of the future of how Ethereum will work and how users will interact with it. It just becomes more and more obvious as like L1 fees continue to rise and stay high. So so everyone kind of knows this is where things are going. I think part of it is just like this coordination game, where as more and more projects migrate over, as more and more users migrate over, there's more of an incentive for more users and projects to migrate over. So it'll just there'll just be some. I think there'll be some threshold or some tipping points that get crossed there. I think in terms of other than just like the coordination problem of moving activity onto layer two, in terms of some of the UX hurdles, I think one thing when it comes to like, bridging assets, moving Ether or tokens across layers, the UX there is sort of this, right now it's kind of this slightly awkward Frankenstein mixture of wallets telling you some things and various user interfaces telling you things. So like we have our bridge UI, so we have our, our design there, and then various other apps have sort of solved that in their own ways, and it's I think increasingly what can and should happen is more and more of that that sort of like UX heavy lifting goes to wallets. That's like the natural place to do this, and by that I mean, you know, just conveying to users what's going on, showing them sort of what their balance is and when and where, things like that. These are hard UX problems to solve, and like I'm not the one to do it, so I don't even know what exactly to describe. But I think there's clearly gains to be had there in just making, you know, making like multi-chain wallets, let's just say, generally speaking, more intuitive and more easy to use. So I think um, as those things improve, that'll also just kind of pull more users to layer two. You know?
Awesome. Next question. Why use Arbitrum instead of any other L1?
So I can give my general view on this, which is I think the way I see it, and I think increasingly, you know, more and more people in the crypto space are seeing things this way, is like, you know, it's a multi-chain world. It always will be. There's always been many L1s. Now there's going to be many L2s. Like that in and of itself isn't going to change. Um, the reason, you know, we're situated on Ethereum. We're all in with Ethereum. The core reason to use Arbitrum is, you know, you want to be sort of part of the Ethereum world, right? And Arbitrum is really just sort of an extension of of the security and the state of Ethereum itself. So that's kind of my view. You know, we could talk about various other L1s. Some are better than other, but it's not as though, in my mind, we're inherently against other L1s or even necessarily competing with them directly. Where this gets tricky is the question of fees. And there's always going to be some people who say, you know, X has lower fees than Y. I don't like paying fees, therefore shouldn't I just use X? And that's always a hard question because on the one hand it seems totally reasonable, but I think like, and this will just be a constant debate and battle in the crypto space forever because, you know, the thing to understand is like achieving lower fees in and of itself isn't hard if you're willing to just sacrifice security and decentralization. And there's always going to be L1s and L2s, frankly, that are willing to do that, right? So if the only thing, truly the only thing we cared about was lowering fees, we could just say, okay, an Arbitrum validation is now, you know, it's going to be 100 times more expensive than it is today. And it's going to be really hard to run a validator and essentially no one will be able to, but fees will be lower. We just don't want to do that, right? Because we're also sort of trying to be security minded in the same way that like the Ethereum layer one is being security minded. So that's just sort of, yeah, that's just going to be this constant thing that has to be communicated. And it's hard. But yeah, it's just sort of an extension of the old block size debate. It's just like, I don't know, it's kind of the eternal question in crypto of like, why shouldn't I be happy about low fees? But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
Yeah, let me just add a little bit. You know, our mindset about this is really that we're going to be secure and we're going to be decentralized, and then we're going to drive down fees, which we think not only makes sense along the way, but also is a better way to get to the destination that everybody wants to get to, which is a highly secure, highly decentralized, and you'll see like with our Nitro upgrade, fees will go down quite noticeably, and we have more in our pipeline after that that can drive down fees further.
I'll add one thing here, which is there's a spectrum between AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Ethereum, and you know, so as Daniel was saying, you can always have lower fees. We can just relabel AWS and call it a blockchain, and then things are really, really cheap. And then we can go into full security of Ethereum, and there are people that are willing to take different positions along that spectrum. And what we do as a layer two is we believe very, very strongly in the security of Ethereum. You know, Ethereum, you know, a misconception among like other layer twos is it's not Ethereum like, oh, someone else is able to scale and Ethereum's not. Ethereum doesn't scale basically by design. That's not to say that like we sat down and said, oh, we don't want to scale, but when it comes down to making choices between security, decentralization, and scalability, the security and decentralization win out in the base layer. And systems like Arbitrum say, can we have our cake and eat it too? Can we keep the security of Ethereum and not trade that off, but also get scalability? And that's where, you know, we really shine, and that's the value we're delivering. That doesn't mean we'll be as cheap as, you know, all the way on the other end of the spectrum. We're never going to be as cheap as AWS, but you get a really good trade-off point.
Yeah, and we are recording. Someone just asked in the chat. So yeah, you should still stay and listen, but just in case you need to.
Yeah. Exactly. Maybe we shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, if you need to dip out for a minute and come back immediately, you can re-listen to that minute later.
All right. Next question, and this one may be a little bit redundant because of the recent news, but are you guys in communications with centralized exchanges for on and offboarding?
Good
Yes.
question.
So it's probably the only answer we need. Yes, at this point, right? If you hadn't heard, recently, Binance allowed the deposits for, ETH specifically, I think it was, on their, of course, exchange, and I wouldn't be surprised to see more to come. Alpha.
Yeah, that's another important piece in terms of the vision of when more and more users get onboarded. That's a crucial part. Like, people's inroads into crypto are usually centralized exchanges. So if they can just get onboarded directly onto L2s and never have to interact with L1s, that's sort of, I think, the long-term vision. And yeah, Binance supporting Arbitrum is very exciting, and there will be more.
And also just in terms of like being able to onboard to L2s cheaply. Our kind of depositing through our Ethereum bridge is not it's not horribly expensive, but it's definitely not cheap, and it's nowhere near as cheap as using Arbitrum itself. So kind of providing that on ramp where kind of the user only ever has to face kind of Arbitrum level prices compared to Ethereum level prices is, I think, kind of really critical long term. And kind of various solutions can provide that, but sort of, centralized exchange solutions are kind of in a lot of ways the easiest sort of user facing method there.
Yeah, depositing is still an L1 transaction, and L1 transactions being expensive is why we're here. So yes, if we can, the more we can minimize that through these other routes, the better. Which includes other sorts of bridges, right? Like bridging from other chains and things like that. That's another avenue where you don't have to hit the Ethereum base layer right away to get onboarded onto Arbitrum. So yeah, these are all important things. But yeah.
Because that's one part of like the L2 world is basically, I think, long term, basically most users just not using Ethereum mainnet directly. Most users kind of only experiencing the blockchain through layer twos, since Ethereum fees will be sort of up high enough that kind of you really want to be on an L2.
Yeah. Which, if you sort of zoom out and forget what the status quo is, that just actually makes a lot more sense. The idea that the default should be that you're like executing globally and updating global state every time you transact across all these nodes. Like that was fun for a bit while it lasted. We had a good few years, but like, of course, that can't be the long-term vision. So yeah.
Oh god, whenever I onboard engineers into the blockchain space, like that's like horrifying to them. Like this sense that like of the global lock of like any smart contract can synchronously interact with any other contract anywhere. They're just like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
And the answer is we're building L2s.
The answer is
Yeah. Yeah. You almost never use global state like in any program other than blockchain protocols. Like that is an expensive thing to have. So yeah.
All right. Next question.
How we got on that. Oh yeah, Binance. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Shout out to Binance, by the way. Definitely should shout them out there.
Yeah.
How does Arbitrum compare to fully featured EVM compatible ZK rollups? Assuming we start seeing these roll out in the next months, and maybe we can kind of frame this question as like, how do we kind of see ZK rollups versus like optimistic rollups in Arbitrum?
Sure. So, I mean, the starting point for this is to talk about, what's the core difference between a ZK-based rollup and an optimistic rollup, right? And an optimistic rollup like Arbitrum, of course, we data about what is happening is posted on chain, and then a validator inside the protocol, a validator can make a claim about what happened. What's the correct outcome of execution, and assuming that's correct, then the system just goes on. Otherwise, there's a cheap and efficient dispute resolution protocol, which will hardly ever be needed in practice. So in the case of ZK, the idea is something else, that when a party to the protocol posts a claim about what the correct outcome of computation is, they have to post along with that a cryptographic proof. And this uses some extremely sophisticated cryptographic math, which allows that proof to be checked, to be small and to be checked efficiently, meaning maybe a few million Ethereum gas to check the proof. Now, the part of ZK that is hidden behind the screen, if you will, that's hidden behind a curtain is how that proof is generated. And the reason that we are really happy to have chosen the optimistic approach rather than the ZK approach is that we don't have to do those proofs. And in fact, no one has to do those extremely expensive cryptographic proofs on an Arbitrum chain. So just to give you an idea of the difference in underlying cost of operation between an optimistic chain and a ZK chain, think about the execution of a contract. And suppose that the contract is doing an add instruction just to add 2 integers, right? In an optimistic approach, a validator just needs to add those 2 numbers. When the contract does an add, the validator has to do an add, and it's that simple. In a ZK system, the validator has to do a zero-knowledge proof over a complex cryptographic circuit. And that means to prove, to build the part of the proof that relates to that one add instruction, someone needs to do hundreds or thousands of elliptic curve operations. These are very expensive, heavyweight cryptographic operations, and they have to do hundreds or thousands of those for each instruction in the contract. And that is incredibly expensive. It's very time consuming. Now, the ZK people say, well, it's okay because we will build exotic hardware to do that, and we'll use massive parallelism. We'll build giant data centers that can do these proofs as fast as an optimistic system can, and we'll see if that turns out to be true. But even so, those giant data centers have 2 big drawbacks. One is they're very expensive, and end users will end up paying for that in transaction fees one way or another. And 2, it means that the system is centralized, because you and I are never going to have a big data center full of exotic special purpose ZK proving hardware. What actually happens in these systems is that they end up being centralized, and only those who have that equipment can produce the proofs and actually allow the system to move forward. So we've always thought it's really important in Arbitrum that any participant in the protocol can, acting by themselves, force the protocol to execute correctly and at full speed. And that's just not a thing you have when you have to do ginormous elliptic curve cryptographic proofs for every single thing that a contract does. So we think there's a lower cost of operation in the optimistic approach, and we think that there is much less centralization. And so, the other argument that ZK folks make, which we also take with a giant grain of salt, is about cost and whether you need to put data on chain. So the reason that we put data on chain in our protocol is because first of all, that's important for decentralization so that everyone can see what's actually happening on the chain. We don't think it's a good user experience or really fair to say, well, every 3 hours, we'll put a state snapshot on chain, but that's all we're giving you, right? We want it to be the case that you can see on the Ethereum chain everything that you need to know to keep up yourself with what's happening on the Arbitrum chain, to be able to see everything trustlessly and to be able to advance the state of the chain yourself trustlessly. And that's why we do the things we do, putting data on chain and so on. And yeah, we could develop versions of Arbitrum where we put less on chain and that are more centralized. And those would have lower costs in on-chain data, but we don't think that's a good trade-off for users. At least we don't think that the way that ZK does that is a good trade-off. Anyway, so I believe that optimistic systems are faster and cheaper because they just do what the contract does instead of doing a lot of fancy proving for every instruction of every contract. And I think that will be permanent, that optimistic systems will always be cheaper to operate and faster than ZK systems. And that's why we're happy we chose the optimistic approach rather than the ZK approach.
Yeah,
Beautifully said.
Another one of those topics we could go off on for like a few hours, but I think that covered a lot of the points.
Yeah, no, you can tell strong opinions about this. And but I wanted to make sure that we get that out there because I think that perspective is not heard as often as it should be.
No, 100%. Did anyone else want to add on to that? Or we can go on to the next question if not.
I mean, I would just throw in, and I kind of touched on this, but like the research problem of like, you know, one thing that Arbitrum offers now is like true EVM compatibility, and not just like the ability to do smart contracts that are on par with Ethereum, but the ability to sort of nicely and easily support like existing tooling and things like that. Like you can just basically take your knowledge of developing on Ethereum and apply it to Arbitrum with like, you know, a few small caveats that you should be aware of. And when it comes to like ZK EVM, it's just sort of like, I mean, it's like fascinating research, and I think this could be valuable, but like, you know,
Yeah.
it's sort of just like show me the money kind of thing. And I kind of just don't think it'll ever reach the point of nice compatibility that Arbitrum is, even, you know, even once those systems are more mature. So yeah, it's where things are at now. They're limited. There's a lot of fine print and footnotes to using ZK EVM of any form. You know, some ZK projects have gone into a total different direction and saying we're just effectively creating our own separate virtual machine, and you may have to like even learn your own programming language to use it. So that becomes different in a different use case. But for EVM compatibility, we think Arbitrum's just like going to be where it's at, basically for good.
I'd add one thing here, which is, you know, there's a lot of promises that different teams give, and you know, some of the costs that I was talking about. When a system is not live, it's a lot easier to make promises and ignore costs. And we've seen this ourselves. You know, when you estimate things to the best of your ability, sometimes, but it's also easier to ignore costs in the system. But you know, we're pretty, you know, I think overall. The other thing to be said, you know, we're overall pretty happy with you know, the optimistic approach. I think that it's the correct approach. And the other thing is, you see claims of, oh, we're gonna have 1 cent transactions or 3 cent transactions, and you know, a lot of the fees, there's the core fees between optimistic rollups and ZK rollups are very similar in that it's the call data on chain, and you know, the layer two fees are the fees that are often important for allocating the resource when you use like computation or use storage on layer two. And what happened is, if you reduce like the cost of storage on layer two, that you can have 1 cent transactions, you'll have a very spammy chain and a negative user experience. And we recently saw the Polygon folks, who, you know, we know quite well. They raised the cost on Polygon because on the Matic chain like 30x or so, because again, it's not really the best thing for a sustainable ecosystem always to have these extremely low cost fees. But anyway, that's a decision that's, you know, that's open for community debate, but it's really agnostic. You know, it's kind of orthogonal to the ZK versus optimistic approach. Is it sustainable to have transactions that allow, you know, high level of spam, or is higher transaction fees better for the health of the network? It's really an orthogonal question, and one which, you know, we're open for community debate, but it's not really ZK versus optimistic. Of course, you know, we have work to get to be done to reduce our you know, with Nitro, we're gonna reduce our costs pretty significantly. But then there's still a question of, it's still, you know, how far down is it healthy for the system to go?
Awesome.
Yeah,
next
and just to be
question.
clear, just to be clear on the question of contracts, like there's, you know, the important distinction I would make here is between, you know, a specific ZK rollup or ZK rollup chain or application specific chain, where like you have a snark circuit or a stark circuit or whatever that's tailored for a specific use case, versus the ability to deploy contracts in the general sense. That's sort of the big like milestone that, as Stephen alluded to, it you know, that they keep sort of mentioning, but it's just not quite here yet. So yeah, application specific ZK rollups are one thing, and yeah, there's a few of those live, and we can see what those are doing. But the ability to deploy contracts in a ZK rollup environment is like a whole other
And to be able
story.
to do it at scale, right? The Arbitrum chain has 17,000 contracts on it, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, 17,000.
I think that's
crazy.
Let you guys know if that's wrong.
No problem. All right. No, yeah, I think this definitely helped maybe kind of clear the floor on the whole ZK rollup versus optimistic rollup kind of debate we've been going on Twitter for quite a few weeks now.
And
Oh, awesome. But yeah, next question we have is on Nitro. So what is the timeline on Nitro, if there is one, and are there any estimates on the performance increase / transaction cost reduction for Nitro?
Yeah, happy to jump in here. So I think we're not quite at the phase of like being ready to set a public timeline yet. I'd say like when we set timelines, we mean them and we hit them. Which just to be a little snarky here, is not true for a lot of teams in this space, but I think we've shown pretty consistently. But I can say that we're moving fast and we're excited. We already have we're already at the point of having sort of internal like an internal test net that's incomplete but like significantly implemented, that's working, and we're already sort of like starting to think about what sort of having a public test network looks like. So it's moving fast, and I'm definitely looking forward to us reaching the point where we're ready to say a lot more timeline wise in not a huge amount of time. In terms of kind of the estimates for sort of what effect Nitro is going to have, it's a good question. It's also one where it's hard to say anything completely firm here, just because we're still working on a lot of implementation details. I think that like before we go live, we'll have sort of much more concrete numbers here. Until then, I'm going to give sort of best guesses. That we think that we're going to be able to get around a 50% drop in costs. Maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, but that's at least our best guess right now. One of the major things there is call data compression. So just like the regular compression applied to the call data that's being posted to Ethereum, given that call data is the biggest cost, if we can compress it down smaller, then we can kind of save a lot for users. So that's kind of one kind of specific feature that we're working on that we're pretty excited about in terms of the improvements it'll cause. On the kind of capacity, on the computational capacity side, it's pretty interesting, and I'll say we're still figuring out kind of exactly what we want to do here, and this kind of loops back to kind of this concept that Stephen was mentioning earlier in terms of sort of how fees and how sort of throughput on layer 2s work. And I'd say kind of roughly the way I like to describe this is that kind of right now in the current version of Arbitrum, there's a variety of areas where there's kind of overhead associated with all of the fancy stuff we do in order for kind of Arbitrum to be an optimistic rollup rather than kind of just being sort of a traditional side chain. And so kind of the cool thing that Nitro does is it gets us to kind of basically being able to operate with the same sort of performance as Geth can out of the box. And within that, there are a lot of choices to make. I mean, then there are a variety of kind of proof of stake EVM side chains out there. I'm sure a lot of people here are probably familiar with plenty of them, and kind of each of them has made sort of their own decision about the kind of how they want to set their gas limit. We're kind of still looking at exactly how we want to do this, and there's like the trade-off space of kind of chain, how expensive it is to run a node versus kind of how much capacity there is. But I think we're still kind of deciding the precise details of what we want to do there. But I think the thing we can say with confidence is that we're removing a lot of overhead in the current system, and so we're going to be able to get a very nice increase over kind of where we are with the current system, while probably simultaneously reducing the requirements that exist to run a node. Which is pretty awesome. I think I covered most of that. Let me know if I missed anything.
Shout out to various members of the team who are in the audience, not on stage, who have been doing the Nitro work or focused on Nitro. Yeah, it's really cool stuff. I see Lee and Rachel and Tristan.
Yeah, it's gonna be really cool. You guys are gonna love it when we do sort of throw open the doors and show you what it is. I think it's a really cool piece of tech.
Yeah.
it's also like, this is not really on the question, but just like while we're talking about Nitro stuff, like to drop a brag here, sort of, it's been really fun working on, because we've gotten to sort of like we're working much more tightly with kind of integrating with Geth, compared to kind of our other compared to Arbitrum currently, which is a pretty independent project, and it's already given us the opportunity to start kind of contributing back up to Geth as well, and providing kind of I mean, relatively minor so far, but able to provide contributions back to the Ethereum community in general. So I think we've already had three small contributions to Geth through the work we've been doing, which has been pretty fun.
Scaling Ethereum in every way, I guess. All right. Do you want to throw anything else about Nitro in there before we move on?
Let's move on.
Beautiful. What are the current short-term pain points or bottlenecks the team is currently facing?
We need more people to work for us. That's honestly the main answer. Yeah, we're hiring pretty aggressively, and yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool just to see like a whole ecosystem develop. But it takes it definitely takes a village. And there's pretty much like there's room to grow on like on like all of the various sub teams or like verticals we have on our team. There's room to grow. So I would say that's the main thing.
Jobs at offchainlabs.com.
Yes, thank you.
And we're hiring
Yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
mostly engineers, but if you're if you think you're really good at what you do and you're a big fan of scaling Ethereum, then I'm sure we'd be happy to get your resume in.
Yeah, and like on the engineering work, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Harry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's funny. We used to be mostly engineers, but then we we got towards mainnet launch and we started actually like doing stuff that required like speaking and not just being like in basement caves and
Being actual humans, you mean?
So like now it's actually like a decent balance, which we discovered is actually like pretty useful, having like more ability to actually like speak and write in public.
Well, we're really,
Yeah.
I mean, we're really hiring across a broad range of areas, as we've said, because because we do have big ambitions to scale Ethereum, and that means working with people across all parts of the community. It means getting the word out, and it also means doing a lot of different kinds of engineering. But pretty much any kind of engineering role that exists in the blockchain Ethereum space, we do it, and we do a fun version of it, and we need more people to help us.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It's like pretty much anything you can imagine that's like blockchain related, or even some things you maybe even wouldn't associate with being blockchain related. There's like there's stuff that we do. So yeah, it's a fun stack to work with in that way.
Just drop the lever link, by the way, if anyone wants to look at some of the positions we're hiring currently in the AMA chat.
Nice.
This was some good shilling.
I know, right? Yeah, this is a big shill.
Hey, we can chill on our own Discord. Like that's cool.
Yeah. Next question. Will Arbitrum make? Well, I guess I should probably reword this. What does Arbitrum's progress look like on the NFT front?
Ooh, yeah, right. Actually, so yeah, I can talk about stuff on the technical side. Maybe Hunter, do you want to answer this in terms of just like I know that you've been sort of interacting with the NFT community. On the community side,
for sure.
Give people a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I can kind of touch on that, and you can touch on the technical part of it. So for the most part, the NFT like ecosystem on Arbitrum has been growing quite a bit. We've been making like a whole bunch of like connections and actually like I don't want to say the word partnerships, but like it's just like integrations here and there. One of the biggest ones was the NFT Alliance more recently. Pretty much just a group of NFT projects built on Arbitrum that are just looking to obviously, kind of like get the word out that the NFT ecosystem on Arbitrum is getting bigger, and that it's kind of like a one-stop shop for like anyone trying to build a project or just looking to be exposed to just like the entire thing in general. So we have a lot of projects building on Arbitrum. A lot of them are actually building their own marketplaces because, like, where else would you sell them? And even on the artist front, we just hired Size Chad, who's, kind of the main focus for him is, NFT and gaming. And he's got a whole bunch of connections in that industry as well. And we're definitely making some moves, both on the exchange side of things as well as the artist side of things as well. So definitely stay tuned. It's the kind of thing where it's like I wouldn't be surprised if it's like in the very short term, we see like NFTs kind of like explode on Arbitrum. But to me personally, it's the kind of thing where like I like to be there first before the masses come. So just some alpha there.
There's been acquiring NFTs, is what he's saying.
Well, I can't say that, but yeah.
That's why I'm saying it.
Hunter is our resident team ape.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Or DGen, whatever you prefer. Daniel, if you want, you can kind of pick up on the tech side.
Yeah. On the tech side, we are moving forward in implementing / talking about NFT bridging, which is to say like the ability to move NFTs or move 721 tokens between Ethereum and Arbitrum. The interesting thing here is like the technical work here is largely just done. Like a lot of the work and a lot of the harder problems we can sort of we sort of already confronted when we did our fungible token bridge, ERC20 bridge. This bridge architecture, it turns out, will look very similar, and we kind of already we constructed it in this like modular way, so it's fairly easy to sort of add a new type of bridge or a new type of gateway, to use our terms. Big technical challenges to solve here. The phase that we're at now is we're more just trying to figure out like what sort of standards the community wants and what sort of things what it really means to have an NFT bridge and how exchange just to kind of like make everyone's life easy. Yeah, so we're sort of looking into seeing sort of what patterns have been used. Vitalik put out a post a little while ago proposing a standard. I guess it was just like a month ago, but it feels like a while ago. It's been a crazy few months for us. So yeah, we're just sort of gathering input on this, and I guess if I hope I don't regret saying this, but feel free to reach out if you're involved in some sort of like, especially if you're particularly if you do infrastructure stuff that involves NFTs, exchanges, anything like that, and you have any thoughts on NFT bridging. Yeah, we want to just sort of collect as much feedback as possible. Please don't just show me your NFTs. That's the part I hope I don't regret saying. That's not what I mean. But yeah, do feel free to reach out. But yeah, that's something we're excited about. But as Hunter said, like even what's been cool to see is even without the ability to like bridge L1 NFTs over, at least not in a way that's supported by us at Arbitrum, this like Arbitrum native NFT ecosystem is taking shape in a very cool way. And I'm seeing some pretty neat projects. So keep an eye on that space.
Awesome, yeah, and I definitely just like to throw in there too that like our biz dev team is like next to none in terms of like how like amazing they are in terms of just getting partnerships going and like talking to these different projects and making sure that they're looking at Arbitrum to build next, or if they haven't built, to actually build an Arbitrum as their first, hopefully only. So definitely got a shout out, you guys in the crowd as well. I see you in the crowd there, AJ. But yeah, no, I think we all know that NFTs are definitely going to be play a huge role with crypto in general in the future. And I guess the main point here is that we're not blind to that, and we know that for the most part, like especially this past year, we've seen like NFTs kind of like explode in general and brought a lot of people into crypto. So we're definitely keeping our eye on that and making sure we're putting a lot of our initiatives towards that. I think other than that, we can look for some more questions in the chat as well. If anyone has any more, we can kind of throw them in there. Was there anything you guys kind of wanted to just mention to the audience while we're taking some questions in before we end off?
I'll just do a quick one because it's a question I saw that kind of made me laugh. Someone said,
Go for it.
Ethereum is the worst chain in terms of user experience, yet it's the most used chain. Why? And this is just to sort of call back the mini rant about fees and L1s versus L2s. Like, it's the worst experience because it's the most used chain, right? And this is just like, this is, worst experience in terms of fees. That is because people use it. And that is because Ethereum hasn't, the Ethereum community hasn't just sort of taken the easy route of saying, we'll just, remove the gas limit or have a ridiculously high gas limit and become centralized. So this is just kind of like the way these systems work. As they become more used, fees will go up, and then you have to sort of go to other technical solutions to scale them and preserve their user experience, which is why we're here. So yeah, it's an important thing to understand. But I like the way it's phrased. The question is phrased. It made me laugh.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think Ethereum is my favorite chain, obviously besides Arbitrum. But like, I don't know.
I mean,
I don't think
this guy with a big Bitcoin logo in his image.
I didn't notice that.
I said you have a big Bitcoin logo in your profile image.
You mean 100 does, yeah.
100 does, yeah.
That is true. Oh yeah, no. I should probably take that off, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
I should have a wrap Bitcoin actually in there instead.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Wrap Bitcoin or TBTC. The other thing we can, if we have a little more time, I was just thinking, we kind of alluded to but didn't talk about, sort of decentralizing the sequencer, distributing the sequencer. We can go into that if we want to get a bit wonkier.
I mean, either that
sure.
or tungsten spheres versus tungsten cubes.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's a good one too.
Let's start with that question. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all right. Maybe decentralizing the sequencer is a little bit more on topic.
Yeah. I want to go with Ed on that one. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a sphere maximalist. I'll just say that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. We have that on the record. That's important. Let me talk about decentralization generally, but decentralizing the sequencer is an important thing, right? So the sequencer is a key part of our design because this is what allows you to get very fast, very short latency for getting the result of your transactions, right? Faster than Ethereum block time. And that's key for user experience. And of course, right now we Off-Chain Labs are operating the sequencer, and if the sequencer is dishonest, it can't cheat or put in invalid transactions, but it could play with the ordering of transactions in a way that might be harmful to users, right? And so we want to be able to decentralize that function. And that means not just like a scheme where you have an auction where people can buy the right to be the sequencer, the centralized sequencer, but to have a scheme where you really decentralize the sequencer. And so our esteemed CEO, Stephen Goldfeder, and some other researchers at Cornell Tech wrote a paper now a couple of years ago talking about a way of having a committee-based fair sequencing system. The idea is you have a committee of sequencers rather than one sequencer, and as long as a supermajority of that committee is being honest about the order in which they receive transactions, then you're guaranteed that the resulting sequence is fair. So basically, you have a committee of sequencers. Each one publishes a kind of feed of in what order it saw the transactions, and then you have a provably secure, a provable algorithm which combines those sequences and provides a guarantee that the resulting sequence is fair. So that gives you the best of both worlds. It's decentralized because you have this committee, but also it gives you fair sequencing, which we think is super important. In our view, the idea that there's some party out there who can front run you or sandwich you or just in general manipulate the order of transactions for themselves or their friends, we think that's a really bad thing. It's bad for users. And so we want decentralization, we want fast response time, and we want fairness. And the way to do that is this committee-based fair sequencing. So anyway, to rewind a little bit, Stephen and colleagues wrote this academic paper a couple of years ago, which proved that this was possible and gave an algorithm that could do it, but it was quite inefficient. And so what's happened since then, basically in the research world, is improvements that get you to algorithms that are fast enough and efficient enough to be practical. And that's kind of the path forward, right? That this committee-based fair sequencing system, and this is something we'll be talking more about the timeline for rolling this out. And we'll be talking more about exactly how we're going to do it going forward. But this is something we're working on that's in our roadmap. And it's important to be able to be fully decentralized and fair and fast.
I see some people sort of really do know like the lingo and tech about fair sequencing in the chat, which is cool. We're getting the question about someone asked in fair sequencing services, how does the committee come to consensus when there need to be an underlying ledger coordinating them? I think like the key intuition here is that whatever you do for the sequencer kind of has its own distinct consensus mechanism beyond that of like the L1 and therefore the core rollup protocol. So there's kind of these two separate phases.
Yeah, the other thing to say about this is, of course, we have an efficient ledger that is smart contract enabled in our system, and we call it Arbitrum, right? So you do need to have some fair and reliable way of fair, transparent, and reliable way of combining the transaction sequences seen by the different sequencers into a single feed. And there's a lot of sophistication in the algorithm that you need to use. But basically, yeah, you do need to have an efficient ledger for doing it. And but of course, that's a thing that we already have.
Yeah.
All right. I think unless we have any other questions, I think we should be good closing off after this. I think we're about to hit an hour. Do you guys have anything else you kind of wanted to let the audience know, or if not?
No.
Use Arbitrum.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Use Arbitrum.
Yeah, exactly. Use Arbitrum, please.
Visit our portal.
Arbitrum, visit us.
Our portal. Apply to work for
Make sure to check out the links. The links channel on the top left. We can visit all our portal, the main websites, the bridge, all that stuff. Make sure you get exposure to Arbitrum. Thank you, obviously, everyone, for tuning in today. I will be posting part of this AMA on YouTube later next week for you guys to just watch it back if anyone left, or if you want to just kind of rehear what we said. The next AMA will be with the DOPEX team. The date for that is to be determined, but just tune back into the Discord and I'll make an announcement about that later on. And we mentioned it earlier, and I'll mention it again. We are hiring again, a bunch of different roles. Make sure to check out the links tab again in the top left to just see which roles you maybe fit, or just shoot us an email at jobs@offchainlabs.com. But with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you guys for speaking today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Al.
Everybody.
All right.
Cheers.
See you guys.